Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Worth Your Time, Worth Your Money, an ongoing segment I do on this channel where I just look at the opening hours of new and upcoming games, and today we're having a look at The Outer Worlds 2. Right, how do we cut this pie? This game, for many people, is going to be exactly what they think it is. I really don't think there's anything here that's going to convince you to get it if you're kind of set against it. We'll talk about some of the issues with the themes around this game, but I'm not going to blow smoke up you. It's probably not going to change your mind. However, and I'm not immune to the reviews that are right in front of me on the Steam page, it seems to be being well received from those who have elected to pick it up, and good for them, right? Now, The Outer Worlds 1 and 2 kind of boggle my mind a little bit, and they do tickle part of the back of my lizard brain. I like them. I like aspects of them. I like the world building, the mechanics, the Fallout-ism. I know it's Obsidian and not Bethesda, right? And Obsidian can only really ride that bloody lightning of being the guys that made New Vegas for so long. But there is something to their construction. As someone who bangs his drum pretty heavy about gameplay first and, narrative second, I will say that their formula is pretty well polished. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to like it. It's not for everyone. But I guess my point is that, generally speaking, thematically, messaging-wise, all of the writing, I kind of really dislike about Outer Worlds 1 and 2, or I dislike aspects of it. It seems a bit more muted here, at least compared to bloody Forspoken. That was the writers given carte blanche, and it was insufferable, but I still really don't like what they're doing thematically. However, I can't deny that I still, would probably happily play many more hours of this and get through it, because I find the loop to be comfortable. Something that did boggle my mind is how good the graphics are. And when I say that, I mean the character models. They've also got this, it was kind of like a TV serial, a Flash Gordon thing. I mean, look, I don't know enough about the world building, but you're a different faction in this. You're sort of the good guys. Some sort of space police, right? You have an authority and organization, and yet in the opening cutscene, they've got the hero, they have a TV show hero version. It's a very propaganda on the nose, and that's part of the haha funny. Kicking in the door and shooting up the corporate mascot and murdering him in a corporate universe. I can only assume that the video is showing explicitly illegal material in their world, and yet they're the good guys. So I don't understand it. Maybe it's a joke flying over my head, but the world is very, corporatism, and it's supposed to be a commentary on corporatism and how we all hate it because we're all closet communists, from a developer perspective, right? And it's all on the nose, and it kind of is one of those things where the dumbest guy in the room thinks he's the smartest guy in the room because all the other people are being quiet and just want to keep their jobs. This is the same writing problem that you see in a lot of modern games. They think they're fucking hilarious, and most gamers just think it's cringe. But yeah, so I find that really confusing that you're playing as a superhero faction, which I kind of like as an on-ramp as opposed to the first game with the Doc Brown surrogate thawing you out for his means and ends and being forced to go along with it. This time, they're starting us in the universe from a different perspective, and I find that interesting. But yeah, we're some sort of super space police, but we have propaganda films where we execute the figureheads of the opposition who run legal companies. I don't mean to be hung up on it too much, but it just seemed really jarring and in poor taste, honestly. But to come back to what started me on that, the graphics are something else. The FMVs look really cool, uncanny in a way. As much as the characters are still this weird, kind of lifeless marionette head on a stick flogging around, all the chicks have shoulder length, boy cut hair, there's something particularly almost androgynous about all of the Fallout characters, all of the, Starfield. All these things that were born off the back of Fallout 3, Obsidian or Bethesda regardless, that's still here, but it feels kind of like a next generational step, which is fascinating because they had Forspoken earlier this year, and I commented on it, a lot of the characters kind of looked a bit downy, a bit droopy faced, like there was something going on. I don't know what happened there with their character design, but this time around, it's kind of wild. It feels like a console generational jump to me, even though they have that sort of Fallout verse jank in their character woodenness and designs. They still look a bit more lifelike. It was a bit strange. Anyway, like I said, that's the setup. You're playing for these space super cops. You get to pick your background, and I enjoy the little perks and the bits and bobs, and I can pull open doors because I'm brawny, but getting little conversation bumps. And my dude that I rolled was like an ex-convict, so he has a bit of a background trying to make up for that. And for the most part, when the game plays it straight, I'm in, right? I'm all keen. And from the perspective of the modern creative that's given too much rope, carte blanche, that think they're the cleverest dude ever, they must find that stuff to be boring. And look, let me just point you to an anecdotal example that kind of encapsulates everything that I just hate about the direction of all of this writing. But at the same time, as a comparison between this game and their previous one, Forspoken, that was out of control, horrendous, irredeemable writing. Everything's snarky and sardonic and thinks it's funny and self-aware, and everything wrong with, the Serenity come Avengers dialogue that we've learnt to despise, and yet these people are the ones in the writing room, and there's no stopping them because, like I said, there's an ego relationship. They think they're fucking funny. They think you're a fucking idiot. But I'll give you, a glaring example from my playtime with this. I had a dialogue with this dude, and he said something to the effect of, I'm glad you're up and around, I'm glad that you didn't get turned into stew, human stew, something like that. You didn't get killed. And it gave me a couple of dialogue options, and here's the thing, I took note of it. You'd think you could just say, oh, thanks, cool, bro, cheers, mate, But they have to put it in. They have to put, seems I'm stuck experiencing the miracle of human consciousness for a bit longer. And look, the thing is, if you don't see a problem with that, I don't know what to do with you, man. Because the rest of us out here in reality hear stuff like that, and all we hear is not an immersive line, not an in-universe thing. We hear a writer that thinks they're hilarious, putting in yet another thing. And it's not the biggest delivery joke or anything like that. It's just your medium, low-hanging, run-of-the-mill, middle ground joke, right? And I guess, look, I risk losing the thread because I get angry and I get wound up, and while I try and keep calm, it can be difficult not to just slip into rant. But here's the thing that they miss. That, even like, Commander Shepard in Mass Effect, people might argue that a lot of his answers were binary or pretty basic, or maybe one neutral one and one good, one evil, right? But generally speaking, his smart-assedness was very curbed. There were some exceptions, right? But the truth is, Commander Shepard was kind of bland, right? His personality was less about his witticisms and more about his blue versus red. His good versus evil dial, right? Like, the personality was not manifest in clever writing, it was more in moral dilemmas and navigating them. When you do it the way that these guys are doing, devoid of morality, but clearly through the lens of a writer that thinks they're funny, what ends up happening is you're trying to force me to roleplay 3 different versions of the same loser writer that I despise, and would probably despise me as well. And I think that's the thing that they miss. They think it's immersive because it's them role-playing themselves, writing how their smart-ass brain thinks a hero would react in the moment, but they don't realize not everyone wants to play some twisted version of a critical role bard dancing in the spotlight and having their diva moment. I kind of just want to play a plain Jane normal hero. Anyway, look, this might seem like a small thing to get hung up on, whatever. It's a big deal to me, and I've attempted, even in this very surface level look at this game and video, to try and at least put on the table what it is that upsets us. Note that I never said anything about bloody gender politics or woke or any of that crap. I'm only saying that to point out that the problem is not necessarily any of that, any of the politics. However, what I do suspect is those sort of politics are generally downstream of a certain personality, which in this instance is an artiste who probably hasn't lifted anything heavier than a sack of flour in their life, in a cushy office with no life experience, thinking that everything is improved by pretending that it comes from the mouth of the bloody cowboy captain from Serenity. And I hate it. I hate it so much. Where they see immersion, I see division. You're trying to make me roleplay as a Silicon Valley writer that likes his own craft. I'm trying to roleplay as some gunslinging space hero or whatever. Anyway, this turned into a little bit of a rant. The game's cool. I enjoy the loop because I'm always going to enjoy these Bethesda-type loops because there's a kernel of magic in there. That's a reason why they're so successful. But like I said, the writing just slips further and further away. And while this is way more curbed, let's say, than Forspoken, curbed is not a solution. A solution is a culture change, getting rid of the old writers, replacing actual normie ones that are more grounded in reality. All you're really doing here is trying to tell them to be a bit more subversive with the inevitable messaging and stylings that they do want to push into these games. And I'm sorry, I just don't see the world through the lens that they see them. And as long as they hold the reins and want to keep writing games with this LA bias to them, I'm just not going to get immersed as I did the games that we all grew up on, we all loved, and that arguably all these companies are still riding on the coattails success of years and years later. All right, let's wrap it up. Team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.